Welcome to the Change Makers Pod, the show that focused on how we can collaborate for a better tomorrow, hosted by Zoetis. Hi, I'm Dr. Christine Jenkins, the U.S. Chief Medical Officer for U.S. Operations and also Vice President of Veterinary Medical Services and Outcomes Research at Zoetis. My pronouns are she, her, and hers. And I just want to welcome everybody to this exciting gathering today. Laura?
And I'm Laura Olson, the Senior Vice President of U.S. Pet Care at Zoetis. And my pronouns are she, her, hers. We're here today to talk about diversity, equity, and inclusion with a very special guest, Carla Harris, Vice Chairman and Managing Director at Morgan Stanley. I hope you'll find it to be an engaging conversation, and I'm really looking forward to sharing it with all of you. Thanks so much for joining us today.
If you tuned in, there's a good chance you saw our first virtual town hall live and are here for more insights. But maybe you're listening because you heard from a colleague about what an impactful event it was, and you want to get in on some of the action yourself. Whatever your reason for being here, we're so happy you've joined us. Now, it's time to welcome Carla Harris to the Change Makers Pod.
Welcome to the Change Makers Pod, Carla.
Wow, thank you very much for having me. I'm happy to be here.
Thank you so much for joining us today. Before we get started, can you introduce yourself to our listeners who may not have been at our town hall?
Yes, I am Carla Harris. I'm a vice chairman at Morgan Stanley. I have been on Wall Street for 33 years, and I also lead our multicultural client strategy at Morgan Stanley after a career in capital markets and mergers and acquisitions and a brief time over in investment management. I've also authored 2 books, Expect to Win and Strategize to Win. And I often speak to leaders about how to be a more impactful, powerful, and influential leader in any environment, but certainly in the tumultuous environment that we find ourselves in now. And lastly, I'm also a gospel singer. I have done 5 sold-out concerts at Carnegie Hall, 2 at the Apollo, and I've just dropped my 4th CD this holiday season called Oh, This is Christmas.
Oh
Wow,
my God.
that's so cool.
I am so excited. Oh, and of course, I am a gospel enthusiast and I love Christmas music. So thank you for the heads up on that. Last time I saw you was at our Change Makers virtual town hall where you were our keynote speaker. We had a great Q&A discussion afterwards where I picked your brain. And honestly, that's what sparked this podcast. I wanted the conversation to just keep going. You've got so much to share. I really just wanted to keep talking, but we had to wrap things up because we ran out of time. During your keynote, you shared what you called your quote, pearls of wisdom for how we can achieve our best in the workplace. And I love that you were wearing a string of pearls while doing that, by the way. These pearls are the focus of your first book, Expect to Win. So before we even get into what these pearls are, I want to know more about you, Carla. How did you get started writing books and promoting diversity, equity, and inclusion?
I'll tell you, Dr. Jenkins, I had no aspirations to be an author at all. And in fact, if you had told me coming out of undergrad or business school that I would write a book, I would have not only laughed, but told you you had the wrong girl, because I certainly did not enjoy writing. However, after a few years of acquiring some of these pearls, as I like to call them, my hard-earned and hard-learned pearls, I realized that there were a lot of people who didn't know some of the things that really inform your success equation the same way that I didn't. Walking out of Harvard Business School, every company that I interviewed with was certainly sold to the concept of a meritocracy. All you have to do is be really smart, work really hard. You can go right to the top in our organization. Yet, when I started out in my career, it didn't quite work out that way. I went in pretty smart, magna cum laude, Harvard undergrad, second year honors, Harvard Business School. I certainly am from the South. So as I like to say, you can't outwork me, not even today, 30 years into it. You cannot outwork Carla Harris. But that combination did not equal maximizing my success. So I had to figure out what were some of those other things. And those early years were tough. They were tough. And I learned the pearls that perception is the co-pilot to reality. How people perceive you impact how they deal with you. You have to make sure that you are fearless and willing to take on risk. You have to understand that your work alone is not the thing that will determine how successful you are, or whether or not you get promoted, or whether or not you get paid well. But somebody has to be in the room speaking on your behalf when all those decisions are made. Because when those decisions are made about your compensation, about your promotion, about the next big assignment that could make or break you, you are not in the room when that happens. So who's going to speak on your behalf? Do you understand the concept of a sponsor? Because that's who that is, the person that's carrying your paper into the room, which is very different than a mentor. So understanding those things and wanting to be helpful to other people, because I think that's one of the reasons I've been put on this earth, is to help other people get theirs, and wanting to be helpful in doing that. That is what provoked me to write the book, the first book, Expect to Win. And Strategize to Win was actually inspired because I realized how people were struggling during the financial services crisis. And I realized that I had information that could also be helpful to people as they try to reignite their career, or find the best seat for them, or actually be successful in whatever seat or environment they had chosen.
Wow, I am so energized as a fellow Southern girl. I want to say, just to hear more about your journey, I think is so relevant to all of us. And I wish I could bottle up your wisdom and share it with veterinary students and alike, because what you shared about your observations with companies, we certainly recognize that veterinary students and veterinary professionals, regardless of where they are in their career path, can certainly learn from your pearls of wisdom. Laura?
Yeah, Christine, I could not agree more. And what strikes me is the courage that you had to embark upon this journey, right? To really start taking a stand and to help colleagues and other individuals across the country with your pearls of wisdom. So thank you so much for finding that courage and finding your voice to help others.
Yeah, I don't know if I would call it courage, Laura, as much as it was a motivation or appetite to share it, to say, hey, I didn't know this. I wish I had known this. Let me tell you what I figured out, right? That might help you too. And as I like to say, Laura, the pearls are industry agnostic, they are seniority agnostic, and they are gender agnostic. They will help you no matter where you are in your career. I certainly wish I'd had them when I was coming right out of graduate school at the beginning of my career. But I will tell you that 33 years into it, I still use these pearls aggressively.
That's fantastic, Carla. Let's talk more. Our audience, they're here today, not only to hear our conversation and to learn more about the insights that you can share of relevance to the veterinary profession, but let's talk specifically about the pearls that are relevant to diversity, equity, and inclusion.
Mhm.
What can you do to help us hone in on developing strategies, both as individuals, as leaders, but more importantly, for the organizations that we serve?
Yes. The first thing, Dr. Jenkins, is that you have to say to yourself that this is a strategic imperative. It cannot be around what's the right thing to do. Because frankly, as people, we might not agree on what the right thing to do is. But as business people, we will agree on what the commercial thing is to do. So the first thing is to make sure that you have a solid grounding in the strategic and commercial imperative of focusing on diversity and inclusion for your organization. And if you don't already have one, let me offer the business case around diversity. You start with the fact that we are all competing around innovation in some way. It is the dominant competitive parameter across all industries, whether it's veterinarian, whether it is financial services, whether it's academia, whether it is oncology, it doesn't matter. If you are not innovating, you are not going to be able to compete. If you cannot compete, you sure will not be able to lead. And every company wants to lead. So innovation is the dominant competitive parameter across all industries, which means you must agree, if you're with me so far, you must agree that you need a lot of ideas in order to come up with that one idea that will be the innovative idea that will allow you to obtain and retain a leadership position in your industry. Well, if you need a lot of ideas, then you better have a lot of perspectives, because ideas are born from perspectives. If you need a lot of perspectives, you better have a lot of experiences, because perspectives are born from experiences. And if you need a lot of experiences, you better start with a lot of different people, because experiences are born from people. So you must start with a lot of different people in the room to get to that one idea that will allow you to obtain and retain a leadership position in your industry or in your firm, in your organization. So that's the business case around diversity. Now, the question is, how do you implement it on a day in and day out basis? Well, the person that can implement and help sustain a long-term competitive diversity strategy is somebody who is inclusive. And the way you show up as an inclusive leader every day is to be committed to soliciting other people's voices. Even if you have the right idea, even if you think you have the thought or the answer that will dominate the conversation or that is the right answer, you still, as a leader, have to get into the rhythm of saying, oh, Christine, how are you thinking about this? Here's the problem that we're trying to solve. Laura, what would be your perspective? Now, Lena, how would you play devil's advocate on that? Let's make sure that we've thought about all of the gaps that could be in those arguments and how somebody might argue it from the other side. And as a leader, if you get into the rhythm of soliciting your team's voices, then after 4 or 5 times of doing that, you won't need to do that. Your team will come together with a collaborative mindset, with a contributing mindset, and they'll be ready to contribute their ideas. Now you can start to show how you value each of these ideas, how you value the diversity of thought, you value the diversity of the person, you value the diversity of the background. And as a leader, when you show that kind of behavior, that becomes infectious. So that is how you can start to focus on the diversity, showing that you're valuing the diversity and being intentional about the diversity. And the last thing I'm going to say about that is, as a leader, when you are making people decisions, you must make sure that you are pushing against the natural strength of unconscious bias. We all have it. I don't care who you are. We all have it. As an educated, enlightened woman, I will give you an example of my own unconscious bias. I built a team at Morgan Stanley around the multicultural client strategy, and we built what right now is the only multicultural innovation lab of all the firms on Wall Street. 18 months into that journey, I looked up and my entire team was women. Oh, it was multicultural, but it was all women. Not an ounce of testosterone to be seen. Why? When we are operating in a dynamic, highly competitive, intense, fast-paced environment, we all reach for the familiar. You reach for the familiar. You want to get it done. You don't have a lot of time. You got to get to market. You reach for the familiar. It is natural. So as a leader, you have to push against that, which you know is going to happen, and you must be intentional. So once I looked up and I saw my team was all women, I was very intentional about making sure the next 2 hires were men. Right? It was an imperative to make sure that I get it done. And if you don't think you have a lot of candidates, then you leverage your network. You ask your colleagues. You hire an executive recruiter with a specific directive. But there is no excuse for not getting the diverse talent onto your team and into your organization, because there is not a supply problem. Not at all. Right? You have to make sure that you get in the traffic if you want to find the candidates.
Boy, what a phenomenal summary of how organizations, no matter what size of the organization, how we can actually step back and look at the business case, our own personal business case around DEI. Well, one of the things that I heard you talk about is that once you are able to recruit, develop, and retain a diverse team, how do we address culture, and how do we as leaders make sure that our team members know that we expect them to be comfortable with their authentic selves? We recognize as leaders that if they feel comfortable within our work environments and culture, that they're more likely to challenge ideas and bring innovative ideas forward. Let's talk about authenticity and how, as a leader, we can stimulate that.
Yes, thanks so much for that question. I do feel strongly, as you know, that your authenticity is your distinct competitive advantage. And as a leader, it's even more important that you bring your authentic self into the environment. And the reason why that is such a critical question, Dr. Jenkins, is that most of us who are boomers or older Xers that are in the leadership seat today, we actually grew up, or we earned our stripes in a leadership environment where, frankly, my way or the highway type leadership was the prevailing style. And so in that case, you quickly try to, emulate the behavior of the leader or what you thought was dictated by the environment or the culture. So most of us who are in leadership positions today are not used to bringing all of who we are into that environment. So you have to actually get yourself comfortable with doing that. And again, as a leader, everybody's watching you. So if you can say things like, here's who I am authentically, good, bad, or ugly. Here's what I think is the good. Here's what I'm working on that might be the ugly. But you know what? I cannot in a vacuum say whether or not this or that is being impactful. I'm looking for feedback from you guys. So if I step in the wrong way or I say the wrong thing, as they say in our community, Dr. Jenkins, oh, charge it to my head, not my heart, right? But I need some help. I need some help because that's the only way that I'm going to continue to improve as a leader. And my commitment to you for giving me that kind of feedback is that I will give it to you all straight, no chaser. You will not have to figure out where you stand with me. You have to figure out what I'm really thinking because I will be transparent. So that is my commitment, that we have a two-way street. And I'm going to bring my authentic self to the table, and I expect you to do the same thing. Because when we can be in an environment where we can be who we really are, we all outperform. And that will accrue to your success in your chair and my success as a leader. So can we have a mutual commitment? That's part of the narrative you can deliver as a leader. Because if you've not been in that space, nobody's going to buy it in the beginning. So you have to be consistent with that behavior and you have to underscore it, which is why I would start with delivering that narrative. And then you have to follow up on it.
Carla, what you said resonates so well with me. And what I found in my career is that being vulnerable and allowing yourself to be vulnerable to the people you work with your colleagues, it really does help to build that trust. So what you said resonates so beautifully with me. One of the things that we think about, I think everyone on this call today wants to make change and wants to make meaningful change for themselves, their organization, and our profession. But it's one thing to talk about that change, right? But it's another thing to actually do it. And doing it does take some courage and it can be hard. Something that really stuck out for me from your talk was when you explained that many people think they can't make a significant difference in their company because they've convinced themselves that being intentional about diversity is hard and difficult to do, quite frankly. And I find that so interesting. Can you tell me a little bit more about why you think that is and what we can do to really change that mindset?
Yes. And as I said then, Laura, when I hear leaders say that, it immediately triggers in my mind, oh, they're not serious, right? Because if you tell yourself it's hard, then you're going to convince yourself that it's going to take a long time. And leaders know that you have a short period of time to actually put points on the board. But again, going back to where we started this conversation, if you make it a strategic imperative, then at most it takes you 12 months, right? Strategies are reviewed for their efficacy or their success in 1 year. We're going to do this in 21. At the end of 21, you're going to go back and figure out whether or not you got it done. So it's about creating your goals and your targets around what you want to do and recognizing that it really is about making sure that you give yourself access to the resources, access to the talent, understanding if I want to get this done and I don't have these things, what are the tools or who are the people that can help me get that done? We do it with every other part of strategy. I want a 5% growth in revenue. How are we going to get there? What part of the business are we going to focus on? Is there a new area that we actually need to go into, or do we need to double down in the space where we are already leading and try to get more market share? There's a strategy around every goal. So with respect to diversity and inclusion, what's the strategy? How are we going to get there? What does success look like? It is basic business, and in terms of how you get to anything. So it's the same thing with diversity and inclusion. The only difference with diversity and inclusion is because it's always evolving, you do have to run hard to stay ahead, right? Whereas when you get leading market share in a product, you usually buy yourself a little bit of time before the competition is coming, depending on how far ahead you are. If you are 2 points of market share ahead of second place, then you don't have a lot of time. But if you are 20 points ahead, then that buys you some time. With diversity and inclusion, because people are involved, you have to stay on top of that.
Wow, that's just so helpful. You know, I've had a number of leaders that are struggling. They have the commitment to DEI for their organizations, but they feel because they're white males or white females that may not have been exposed to diverse organizations or even diversity within the communities where they live, they're having trouble being comfortable. What advice do you have for them to overcome those roadblocks to help them with their evolution, I call it, to help them feel more comfortable with, the changes that will help them be authentic? What advice do you have for those leaders in particular?
Yes, I would tell them if they're having a roadblock because they feel like they haven't been exposed to it before, then leverage that strength and say, what else in my career was new to me where I had to read, I had to do research, I had to learn how to do it. I had to talk to the person that had the job before me. I had to talk to other people in my network that might have done these kinds of things before. But every single executive has done something new in their career before. So leverage that experience. How did you do it before? Okay, you had to talk to people. Who can I talk to? Look at the people within the organization that know you, that may be able to expose you to their relationships and their networks and people that you might talk to in order to get exposed. Talk to other executives at other organizations about how they have done it. There's a plethora of books that talk about, the Black experience, the inequities of racial justice, things that might give you some background around why people think the way they think, why people feel the way they feel, how has this system come about and been created. And I will share with you, Dr. Jenkins, the CEO of Walmart, Doug McMillon, invited me to participate this summer in a seminar that he had invited a number of leaders across all industries to participate in. And it was put on by the Racial Equity Institute, I believe, REI. And I will tell you that that was probably the most impactful thing I did in all of 2020, because it really did deconstruct how race became a thing in this country 400 or 500 years ago. And I will tell you, as a learned, highly educated woman, I thought I was pretty clear on some of the things that have gone on and that went on before me. And I've studied history, hands down. It was the most impactful thing. And here's what I took away from it. Race and the whole argument around it was created by man. And so my hope, and I'm a glass half full kind of girl, is that if we created it and it became a problem, we can solve it. So there's not some, magic potion or anything. If we created it, we can solve it. But it was provocative, shook me to my core, had me literally wigged out for about a week as a senior executive of color. So, I think it is something that I highly recommend to all senior decision makers is to, as a group, lock arms, 10 of you, 12 of you, 6 of you, and go through this training. It was something.
I captured that one because if you found new wisdom as an expert and a seasoned leader within corporate America, then I do feel that the Racial Equity Institute, or REI, might be a good resource for a number of us who continue to want to make improvements in a positive way as quickly as possible as a part of our DEI journey. So thank you so much.
Yes.
Thank you, Christine. So far, we've covered what it takes to be a successful change maker when it comes to diversity, equity, and inclusion. To recap Carla's pearls of wisdoms, to be successful, we have to build our authentic selves, be transparent and show empathy, and certainly build trust. We need to lead those we manage with clarity and focus on creating other leaders. And we need to stay intentional and honest about diversity and inclusion efforts and always call a spade a spade. So Carla, in your experience, what's the number one reason that you've seen people fail to succeed with implementing new DEI initiatives? Is it really just their fail to measure it, as you mentioned previously, or is there something else?
It's not just a failure to measure it, although that is one reason that people fail. The other is that they fail, Laura, to call a thing, as I like to say at the end of those pearls, is because if you're not willing to talk about where your challenges are, if you're not willing to call out your failures, and certainly to celebrate the successes, then you create a challenge and an impediment right there, because there's a thing that we can't talk about. When you can talk about the difficulty, you actually take the power away and you start on your process of being able to solve the problem or to deconstruct whatever the impediment happens to be. The other reason that people fail is that they don't have a measure of accountability in the whole process. I have not found one organization that is mature enough for it to naturally be a part of their culture. It hasn't been a part of corporate America for all of these decades. And so you can't just decide that we have a focus on it. Now it's a part of our culture. It's going to take a generational shift, if you ask me, for it to even have a chance for it to be a part of the culture. And until then, you need a measure of accountability so that you're checking on whether or not you have been successful. So every year when you have an evaluative process, you're asking your leaders, how did you do on developing your women? How did you do on developing your folks of color? Last year, we had a goal that you would hire more folks of color. What transpired there? Why didn't you come to the organization and ask for help? You can't now, 12 months from now, tell me that, oh, it was difficult, it was hard, I couldn't find any. If you tried after the first quarter and you had no success, you should have come back to the organization and said, Uncle, I need some help. I clearly am not being successful here. So where was that? So that's the measure of accountability, asking those questions, holding people accountable for failures and celebrating. Oh, guess what? Dan got it done. Dan had 5 promotions, 2 were women, 2 were folks of color. Way to go, Dan. Talk to us about how you did it. What was your intentionality? Oh, we have to celebrate Dan. Making a big deal. You got to do it one time, Laura. And once you do that, you will find how fast it spreads throughout the organization.
Wow, that's great advice for us. In thinking about your career, can you share with us a time where you may have struggled professionally around your objectives or goals for DEI? And actually, how did you adapt, and how did you respond quickly to be able to alleviate those struggles?
Sure. Early on in the organization's journey, which I would say started in earnest in the early 90s, one of the first big things that my organization did was to start a scholarship program with 5 historically Black colleges, because as you know, most of the Wall Street firms pretty much recruit from the Ivy Leagues or the sister Ivies, the Wellesleys, the Smiths of the world, for example. So there's sort of 12 or 15 schools where almost all of the junior talent that goes in at the analyst level on Wall Street, we all recruit at the same places. So in 1992, we decided that we were going to do something innovative. We actually set up a scholarship program at Florida A&M University, Hampton, Morehouse. Yeah, go Rattlers.
Go Rattlers.
Yeah, Hampton, Morehouse, Spelman, and Howard. where we actually said, we'll interview in your sophomore year. You'll get a guaranteed internship after your junior year, because we were really trying to build that pipeline into the analyst program. And in your junior and senior year, we will give you scholarship money, $5,000, $7,000, $8,000, no strings attached. So our goal was to get you into the firm, have you really enjoy the experience, and let us recruit you by the time you graduate. And you would obviously want to come and work for us, or maybe work even at another firm on the street, but be now interested in finance and interested in a career in investment banking or sales and trading. So that was the first big thing that we did. Well, there were obviously lots of different comments. Some people thought it was going to be successful, not going to be successful. And I was really raring to go, so happy. But I was a junior person. I was barely a vice president when we started this. So my frustration, Dr. Jenkins, came in people not really listening, or having a foregone conclusion that it wasn't going to be successful, or having the inquisitive or the apathy. Well, why are we really doing this? Why do we need to do that? And what is Spelman anyway? Those kinds of things. So the way that I dealt with the frustration at that time was to do what I could do. And what I could do was to be heavily involved and to go down to Spelman and Morehouse and have sessions. We used to call them Sisters Investing in Sisters, where I would take one of the Black analysts with me, and we would do nothing but talk about, here's the interview process. Here are the questions that you're going to get. Let's do role play. Let's talk about what being an analyst in sales and trading looks like, what being an analyst in mergers and acquisition looks like, to do a fair bit of education, so that not only would the students get excited, but they would understand what they were walking into. They would understand what the key success factors were. They would understand how to get through the interview process and get through the interview process successfully. So that's what I could do. I couldn't change all the senior people's minds, but there were things that I could do to be impactful. I also made sure that I was very involved in recruiting. So I was not only involved in Harvard recruiting, which is my alma mater, but I was running Spelman recruiting. I was heavily involved in running Morehouse recruiting. I was involved in doing presentations at some of the other schools that we were exploring at the time, or that were part of the scholarship program. That's what I could do. So the way that I dealt with the frustrations is I focused on what I could do to make a difference, and I did it. And eventually the organization will catch up.
That's great. One of the things that when we have organizations within the veterinary profession ask questions, okay, where do we start? How do we build a more diverse pool of veterinarians and veterinary technicians and nurses? And for those of us who are products of historically Black college education, to us, it seems so obvious to partner to reestablish or establish new relationships with historically Black colleges or minority serving institutions. It's a no-brainer. Yeah. And so the impact that mentors can have from corporate America, as well as from the veterinary profession, it is long-standing impacts. And so typically, what we say is that, a lot of us are products of those types of initiatives where corporations recognize the talent within the historically Black institutions, and they came to talk to us and they offered us jobs and life experiences. So I'll get off of my soapbox.
That is the easiest strategy, Dr. Jenkins. That's the easiest one. And to educate people on what it means. That's why I said we went down there and said, here's what investment banking is all about. Here's what a job in sales and trading looks like. Here's what it means to be an analyst in M&A. The kids don't know. If they didn't grow up in a household where people were talking about it, they don't know. And like I said to you when we first met, a whole lot of people in my neighborhood had a pet, but nobody had a vet, right? So, yeah. How would you even know what a veterinarian career looks like? What is the path? Why is it rewarding? What do you get out of it? Just like you would recruit anybody to anything new, you have to go down and do a measure of that education to get people excited. And that's how you start to build your pipeline.
Right. Something you said earlier resonated with me, right? You bring your whole self to work every day, and one person can make a difference, right? And the thing about DEI in our companies is that, as you said, it's always evolving, it's always changing, as we are as individuals. Mm-hmm. Personally, I moved into a new position at Zoetis this year, and DEI was one of the key priorities that I wanted to work on. I really do feel in my heart of hearts, much like you, that we can be so much stronger when we bring a greater range of voices to the table. And I really want everyone at our company and everyone that reports to me to feel real comfortable bringing their entire selves to work. I think that's rooted, as you said, in trust, and trust will breed that authenticity.
Mhm.
A few concrete actions that Zoetis is taking this year to advance DEI at our company is to increase training and education for every colleague on DEI. As you mentioned, we're developing and expanding our own colleague resource groups as well as external partnerships so that we can really make sure we're attracting more diverse candidates.
Very good.
One person can make a difference. And your pearls of wisdom and the advice you shared today couldn't be more spot on. It's critical that as an organization, as a profession, we act decisively and with courage to make change happen, to uplift each other and really every employee in veterinary health.
Very good. And I could not agree more.
Great, for sure. I think that's a great summary. And also, as we look at what our strategic approaches will be for our own organizations, we have to make sure that our strategy for DEI actually reflects our core values, or whatever you call your mission and vision, and those key takeaways to make sure that everyone has a shared approach to the values of your organization. So today, we just wanted to make sure that we could continue to engage with you, Carla, around what we can do as organizations within the veterinary profession to change the way we look, to build a diverse and inclusive profession. So we no longer have to have DEI initiatives because it's just a natural way and it is so relevant to the core values that we have as the veterinary profession. So we really want to thank you for joining us today, Carla. We appreciate your willingness to come back and to have this podcast. And any parting thoughts, any parting advice you want to share with, let's just say, the vet profession?
Mhm. I would say put yourself on a timeline. Because as we all know, time is moving so quickly. I personally feel like the first 6 months of this year could very easily be a blur. So personally, I am trying to make sure that I mark every week and every month, and I understand exactly what I'm going to get done. And even down to the point, and I am a nerd, even down to the point of saying, what did I do today to further that goal in terms of what I wanted to get done this month? So I would just offer to you, we've talked about the strategy today. We've talked about the why. We've talked about the how to. So now you have a strategy. Now you need to put forth a timeline and give yourself a time as to what you're going to get done in the first quarter, in the second quarter, so that you can hold yourself accountable and be able to look back, 12 months from now and say, wow, what an incredible year. Look at what we got done and how we enhanced the organization and furthered our overall objectives around success.
Wow, thank you.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Carla.
You're most welcome. Thank you, ladies, for having me. Have a great 21.
You too.